schedule.
Good boy.
Call to order the Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency. And this will be our March board meeting. We've got our pledge of allegiance. Privilege of the floor.
Michelle, are you still hearing this okay?
Yeah, I'm hearing fine. Yep, thanks.
Okay.
We have our minutes from our January meeting. Again, we did not have a February meeting due to a lack of a quorum. Is there any additions and or corrections to the January minutes? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Treasurer's report.
Okay, that's me again. I'm going to once again go forward to February because it's most up to date, and that begins on page 26 of our packets. Again, it's a 5-month period ending February 29th. We're starting out here with the balance sheets and broken out by the various funds. You can see our unrestricted funds. We're in pretty good shape there with $352,000 unrestricted cash. Our reserve for stream is good at $521,000, and I think we're pretty much up to date as far as maintenance there is concerned. And we do have $2,791,000 available in our revolving loan funds available for loans. Pilot money is receivable. You're going to see it offset by the liability down below. Pilot money payable. Our asset, looking down to their longer term assets, we got the equipment that we own to Swallow Mill through the grant. We have the property, corporate park improvements, the airport property, and then we also have what we own for the stream building. Total assets for the agency, $7,698,000, and that obviously includes all of the fund monies. Our unrestricted funds, $1,181,000 total assets there, and the rest is in the stream and so on. The liabilities, we really don't have much for liabilities. Again, the pilots I mentioned, setting the receivable up above. We had the IAP grant, which someday we may have to pay back. So our liabilities overall, $255,000 and $252,000 unrestricted. So our funds unrestricted just under $930,000, and for the agency as a whole, $7,442,000. This is the income statement. This income statement includes all of our income, including our interest income from our revolving loan funds. You can see we're doing quite well against budget when we're looking at year to date. However, point out that we received 100% of the RCI monies for the year already, and we have received 100% of the Convergence Capital Reserve money. So that would put us out of sync a little bit because we won't be getting more of that the rest of the year. You've taken it into our revenues already. So you can see last month we had $17,000 in revenues. This for year to date though, $775,000. Excuse me. Under expenses, we are doing very well there. We're pretty much underexpended, I guess. For year to date, I don't think it's really out of line for what we've overspent at this point. You can just point out to members, you can see the administrative services expense here on the top, and that's the fees that we pay over to the LD each year, or each month for expenses, overhead, and so on that we the LD takes care of our salaries and so on. Revenues, 775,000, expenses, 389,000. So we are showing revenues over expenses of 385,000. And it's mentioned that will go down as expenses go up and our revenues don't go up quite as fast. Going back up to revenues, I did want to point out that the biggest source of revenues that was not quite set, what we can't, our Don and staff have to work hard to do this, but their application and processing fees, we had 287 put in budget for that. We've taken in 102,000. Plus, I think we could add back in here the Don administrative fee and pilot sale leaseback fees, because we don't have any budget for that. So really, we are right on budget as far as those revenues are concerned too. Our next schedule is a balance sheet, and this is a balance sheet that we've really already gone through. The first balance sheet we went through, this would be what was on the far right-hand side for the agency as a whole, and again, you can see total assets of $7,698,000, how much for liabilities, and our fund balance of $7,442,000. Miscellaneous receivables, it's down pretty low at what they're showing right now. I'm assuming they're prepaid, Lyle?
Yeah, that's correct, Michelle.
And then again, I reviewed the cash receipts and disbursements. I have reviewed them for both months. We have loans receivable in here. So you can see who we have loans with. The pilot receivables. Hopefully we'll be getting those because they are showing in the 31 to 60 day category. Disbursements, if they have reviewed those. And then I turn the rest of this over to page 9, which is our Lyle, bring us up to date with what he's doing in those.
Okay, to begin with, we have 2 pilot payments that are delinquent. Buckley was due 12/1/15, has not been paid, and Suncap, the Federal Express building, that was due January 28th, has not been paid. We're not having much luck in either one of those. Going to delinquent accounts, we have Meadowbrook Harris is 1 month behind. That might have been sent into NCA. They're the lead on it. I'm not really sure. Carthage Specialty paid for 6 months behind, but we're collecting interest only on that through a subordination agreement that we signed with Key Bank. Riverview Plaza is 5 months behind, but I provided you with a copy of the arrangements that have been made. North Alliance is lead on that. We've been working with Watertown Savings Bank as well. Going to the Microenterprise Loan Fund, Heroes Haven is 2 months behind. However, they did make a payment on the 4th and the 11th of February. So we had Lyric Enterprise. We have arrangements are pending. Here again, we're working with North Country Alliance and Watertown Savings Bank, and I'm expecting resolution to that probably this month.
Lyle, on Heroes Haven, is that a typo on the year? It says 2/4/15. Should that have been 16?
16. This is yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
Old habits day.
Have you seen our new calendar?
Well, the math didn't add up. 2 months to be great.
And going down to RoboSpray, they're 6 months behind. They just came in and paid $600, and I'm talking with them. We're intending to have this paid off probably this month. That's the goal. So I don't have anyone that's avoiding avoiding me, so I feel pretty confident about collecting.
The
So,
robo spray paid off in full this month, you think?
That's what they're planning, yes.
All right. You know where I'm at. Been on here forever.
Yeah.
I think it celebrated its 100th year in every other day.
so what has been removed is then stay on the Seaway, they caught up,
Paid in full.
paid in full to current.
No, paid in full.
Oh, they got rid
Paid
of
it
it.
off completely.
In full, in full.
Wow,
Yeah.
very good.
That's good.
Questions on the treasurer's report?
Actually,
Looks like we need to get some more loans.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I do have one question on the balance sheet. The value of the airport park, broken up into 3 properties, where are we pulling those numbers from? Just curious, and how big is the overall property?
Look at the first page. Down about mid-page, airport property,
Mm-hmm.
that's the combined amount, that's 544,000.
And what's the overall size? Is that a-
120 some acres.
It's a combination.
Yeah,
The western parcel, which is, you know, the opposite side of the airport.
the Evans property?
That's the Evans property. And that's been environmentally now and ready for occupancy, we believe. And then there's the eastern portion, which is about 80, 90 acres, give or take, 6 of which has been now cleared. We haven't had the stumps removed yet. That will come. That has to be treated very separately. And we have done almost all of the environmental work on those properties, which is absolutely critical for this to happen. And just a little background, not to get too far off in the weeds on this, Dave. We created an organization, informal organization called the Black River West Development Corridor. And then,
let's finish the,
okay,
and then we'll get to that.
okay,
I did want you to give an update on that.
okay.
today, too, so.
Andy?
I do have a quick question, and the question you had just asked is what made me think of it. Lyle, on these improvements that we're doing, are we expensing them or are we capitalizing them?
No, we're required to capitalize them, Michelle. This
Okay,
all,
I thought
this
we
all
were.
becomes part of the cost of the property.
Yep, okay, that's what I thought. So that 144 includes some of those costs that we've incurred.
Yeah, all of the costs.
All the costs, Michelle.
Well, that's exactly
Yeah.
where my question was gonna go.
Yep.
Does
It's all
the,
the costs.
is the depreciation line all assets? It's just a catch-all for,
Depreciation is all, on which one are you looking at?
well, on the balance sheet?
Oh, on the balance.
So like you got all your assets and there's just a
Yes,
catch-all
that's-
for depreciation, so
that's
like the
correct.
sewer tablets, the flour, all of
Yeah,
that stuff is depreciated some way, somehow,
Oh, yeah.
dumped.
Yeah, we have a depreciation schedule. to
Yeah.
follow, yeah.
Oh,
All except land, you don't depreciate.
along those lines, the RBEC grants, which are, that have a period of 5 years, right?
Yes.
Are we required to carry at full value of cost for the 5 years? In other words, at the end of 5 years, $100,000 worth of equipment is not depreciated to $20,000 when we transfer it over. We have to carry it at the full amount.
Well, the flour mill equipment has exceeded the 5 years and is now fully depreciated. We're at the point where I need approval from the board to get this off the balance sheet.
Right.
Because it's no longer ours, it's reverted to North Country Farms.
Right, but any RBEC grant, are we allowed to depreciate it to 0 or close to nothing over the 5-year period on our books?
Yeah,
Or do we have to,
No,
carry it
no,
at full
we-
value and then
we
transfer?
depreciate it over what we determine to be the useful life of the equipment.
So some of that might be 10 years then.
It could be, however, I think the only other piece of equipment we have right now that isn't fully depreciated is the distillery. And I think that how many years have we been at it?
I think two,
So, but eventually, that will be depreciated over a 5 to 7 year period, I forget what we assigned to it. And then at that point, we need to get it off our books. I actually need to get this flour and molasses.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, okay. That was wonderful.
Any other questions on the treasurer's report? I'd entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
a second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution no carries, thank you. Loan review.
Okay, you can see the minutes of the 2 meetings that we've had since our last board meeting. The only action that is being recommended to the board from the loan committee is resolution number 0303, 2016-01, and 02. This has to do with the RC Spot LLC. They have bought out a partner who has pretty much been inactive in the business for the last 6 months or so. And they're asking, and we have 2 loans with them, they're asking that we sign them and re-amortize them, the loans over 60 months. And then that's 01, and then 02 is to release the other partner, Mark Crandall, as a guarantor on the loans. They have borrowed money personally from Coconut to buy out the partners. So that would put out, I guess, a repayment schedule. So it doesn't really affect their cash flow at this point in time. So we are making the recommendation, and they are profitable now. They've been operating and seem to be doing quite well. So what we make a recommendation that we consolidate the 2 loans, re-amortize and release the partner. And I probably can't make the motion because I'm not there, so someone will have to make the motion.
Let's start with resolution number 0303, 2016-01. It's a resolution authorizing a modification to micro enterprise loan to RC Spot LLC. The modification will consolidate 2 existing loans with a combined balance of $50,065.47 and re-amortize over a 60-month period. I entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries. Thank you. And on resolution 0303, 2016-02, it's a resolution for authorizing a modification to microenterprise loan to RC Spot, and whereas as a result of the ownership restructure, request to release Mark Crandall as guarantor from the loans. I entertain a motion and a second on this resolution.
I'll move that.
Discussion? Questions?
Did we, sorry, I sat through that loan committee meeting, and was there some paperwork that we were supposed to get resolved, or is that all taken care of? I know there was some discussion, and it was my first meeting, I apologize, so maybe everything was all taken care of, and this is all that's left?
Yes, leave it.
We talked about having cross-corporate guarantees, but then they explained to us that they only have 1 corporation.
Okay. I remembered something about that. I got a bunch of cryptic notes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I think that was it, and I asked the question, both restaurants are operated under RC Spot LLC.
That's my only question, just confusion, sorry.
Hey,
That's
nothing wrong with a question.
right.
Any other questions? On the resolution, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
Resolution for North Country Farms. I have resolution number 03, 2016-03. It's a resolution for authorizing transfer of title to North Country Farms LLC. Whereas staff requests board authorization to transfer to North Country Farms LLC all of its ownership and interest in the equipment purchased through the USDA RBAC and removed from the balance sheet. I entertain a motion and a second for discussion.
Also move.
Second,
I'll second.
okay. Any questions on this? We kinda just went through it. On the resolution, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries. Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Dan?
Unless you'd like me to run down a couple of items, and I'll wait for that call.
Okay. Let's do our last. It's on page 52. And before I get into this, I want to say that I'm abstaining from voting on this, as I am my company is a client or a tenant within the WIC here.
Would you like me to do a little
Sure.
background, David? This resolution has to do with the mechanism governing this facility. This facility, for our two newest board members, was essentially taken over from New York Air Brakes / General Signal 21 years ago now, when New York Air Brake indicated to the community that it was going to abandon these facilities and gravitate in a much smaller format to the buildings next door. And the community got together. There were many of us, including yours truly, who sat down and said, we can't let this happen, because we're going to end up with a greenfield here or a brownfield here, and it's going to be a disaster, an economic disaster. So anyway, we formed an organization. We met with the taxing jurisdictions. They granted us a payment in lieu of tax arrangement to support this organization. And frankly, the organization has struggled for the last 20 years to make ends meet and to put new roofs on these buildings. They're about $1 million a pop, and there were 100,000 square foot buildings. There were 4 of them on site. It's been a struggle, but the organization has managed to sustain itself over time. There's 183 employees now here on this site. There's some 20, and I think that number is right now, some 20 businesses that are on or attached to this organization. And frankly, it's been one of the brightest success stories of our community. Well, the original pilot agreement was a 20-year agreement. That expired last December 31st. We extended the lease by 3 months in order for us to complete a process to go back to the taxing entities, which the IDA insisted on doing, and ensure that each of the taxing entities were supportive of some agreement to help us manage this property. All of the impacted taxing jurisdictions, the city school, the city of Watertown, the county of Jefferson, have passed supporting resolutions to allow this 10-year agreement. It's now a 10-year agreement going forward. It expires on March 31st, 26. And basically, the format has been changed. This comes by virtue of agreement of all the impacted jurisdictions, spearheaded by the city of Watertown assessor. And what we're seeing here is now this new agreement will fully tax occupied space here, fully taxed. Any space that is not occupied will not be taxed. And then the spaces are broken out into specific applications, and it's a reasonably complicated formula, but it certainly makes sense in terms of what we're doing going forward. So in any event, this represents a 10-year agreement. You would be codifying what the other taxing jurisdictions have already done. It's a step that we need to take, even though the IDA has led kind of the charge in getting this accomplished. It's a very impactful kind of decision, and we think it's of tremendous value. we can see what has happened to some of the other brownfield sites that have been allowed to vegetate, and thank goodness that is not the case here. So it's become a community asset, one that many places around the state look to for example. Billy Solori is the guy who has been managing the facility very well. It has its own board of directors. We're hopeful that one of our new board members will take on the responsibility of sitting on that board and representing us as a player in the operation of that facility going forward. So that's a quick and dirty background on it. 10-year agreement, and we're ratifying that agreement here.
Okay, I have resolution number 0303, 2016-04. The resolution of Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency taking official action toward the continuation of a certain lease agreement between the agency and Watertown Industrial Center Local Development Corporation, dated September 21, 1995, by extending such a lease agreement for an additional period of 10 years by amendment to the lease agreement on land located at 800 Starbuck Ave, Watertown, New York. I'd entertain a motion and a second for further discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I have just a couple questions. So over the 10-year period, maybe 2 or 3 questions out of this. Over the 10-year period, the city assessor determines how many square feet are being used under the 3 categories. It's that individual's determination solely, or is it?
No, I think actually Billy
Well,
provides the information.
Okay.
The,
So it's
there are
basically
three-
the
there are three-
complex,
yeah, there's
is
three
Bill the
classes.
complex manager, is that a fair,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, there are 3 classes of space, the
Mhm.
office space, subpar, and I forget the other
Okay.
category. Based upon the percentage of occupancy of these various categories, that adjusts the assessed value of the building.
Mm-hmm.
We pay full taxes on this adjusted assessment.
Mhm.
So the taxes paid are full taxes, full rate for city, county, school, but it's based upon occupancy, adjusted assessment.
Okay, so.
Billy, just as a follow-up, Lyle's point, Billy provides a summary of the activity within the building, and Brian Phelps, who's the assessor for the city, can come up anytime.
So he vets it, he just,
Exactly.
He has to approve that,
yeah.
yeah, on an annual basis.
And you may change the value of that space too.
That was a kind of a question I had too, is, so we'll use the office space, the 25-45, that stays that value for the 10-year period, or does that go up and down based on?
That varies annually.
Cause I
We'll
didn't,
look at it annually.
I guess I couldn't get that out of this resolution, that I understood the square footage could change, it's inferred, but it doesn't infer that the values would change.
The value is set by the assessor, the full assessment of $1 million, say. Okay, then we break it out. How much of this is office space,
Mm-hmm.
prime space, what percentage is subpar, and so on. And we apply that against the assessment to adjust
Okay.
the assessment up and down. But the assessment is controlled by Brian Phelps.
Okay,
And that, by the way, that analysis could change annually. And the reason for that is, someday, maybe we'll take you on a tour of some of the facilities here, but there's an interesting, this is first class, in our view, first class space, but there are places in this complex, not so good. But we're hoping that by virtue of how we market this and
incubation.
exactly,
sites.
and that those properties within the complex will gradually improve in value.
Apple started in a garage.
Well, exactly, and that's exactly the purpose of all of this, so, but that could change when Brian comes in and looks at this, and frankly, we'll be the first to admit the space has improved,
Okay.
Well, maybe
therefore.
just for our board members, just to clarify, that may not be aware, current application, which now employs somewhere around 50, they have a building. They started here with 6 employees before they grew out here.
Yeah, and there's
There's a
several,
manufacturer and started here with less than 10 employees, and they now employ near 60 up there in corporate.
All right. No, those are, I read this several times and I thought that's what I understood the
What the
background was.
intention.
I couldn't get it out of this resolution, the way it's worded, that those values will change.
this, and that, that's probably a good thing to note in the minutes, so that we have a reflection of this discussion going forward. Because when we do these agreements today, you know, we're all sitting around the room, we're now pretty comfortable.
9
with-
years from now, nobody's
9
gonna
years
remember.
from now, nobody will
Well,
remember.
the pilot document very clearly spells this out. There's not going to be any question.
All right, see, I didn't have the original
The
pilot.
resolution
Yeah.
simply allows us to enter into it, I believe.
Okay.
But the pilot document goes into great detail.
Yeah, the attachment I thought talked about this.
It talks about changes in the city's level of assessment
Yeah,
annually.
right,
Yeah, we have to report.
Do
it.
you have the actual, are you looking at the
The
original pilot?
This is the new pilot
It's the
proposed.
attachment.
It's the
That was to the
attachment.
resolution.
It says the per square footage value for each component building use is calculated using the average value of all space comprising said component and is subject to change each year based
Okay.
upon major construction, demolitions, et cetera, market changes and changes in the
I
city's
missed the
level of
subject to
assessment.
change each
Yeah.
year part, thank you.
The other point though, Rob, is that there is some subjectivity to these discussions,
Mhm.
no matter how you slice it. It's a, you know, do we value this as first-class office space, or, you know,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Reading
So-
through it, I assume that was the intention,
Yeah.
and just couldn't connect the dots.
And this was vetted back and forth with the assessors.
10,000 times at least. Oh, my God.
Thank you, that was my only questions.
This discussion, just for your information, came to the beginning stages 8 months ago. And for 8 months, we have been plodding through this, going back and forth until all of the taxing entities, the assessors, and everybody was comfortable with how this was being approached. And it was an interesting process.
Yeah, and I just want to go on record saying that having watched that process take place, there's been numerous articles in the paper. It's been kind of mainstream news between Watertown School District's concerns, between our concerns, trying to keep this as an incubator space and affordable. You know, there's been, I won't say personal attack, but certainly a personal viewpoint expressed that our chairman had something to gain from this, which was completely erroneous. There's been just way too many negative news coverage of this, I think. But here we are today. This, to Don's credit, this agency, I think, and we can be proud of it, it resolved everybody's issues. We got through it. We addressed all those concerns. In the meantime, the misinformation got cleared up, and everybody's on board with it. I think it's a good illustration of the effectiveness of Don's work and with the county, with the taxing jurisdictions, and it could be used as an example moving forward, because we got another pilot that, you know, we've got to move the same process forward. So I compliment the staff and Don on having resolved this in a very satisfactory manner. And I would also note that when you look at the tax revenue generated from this, it did increase slightly. So nobody was getting a free ride here right along. It was pretty well assessed at the market fair share, and it was generating that fair share revenue for all the taxing identities, which earlier on in the process, it appeared that somebody was getting away with murder here. It wasn't the case at all. And you look at the tax bill now, and it's very comparable with the new pilot going forward to the one that it was 20 years prior.
Thanks, Ed. You know, if I might just add to that, we were initially advised 6-8 months ago that simply by renewing the lease, the document specified by renewing the lease, it would automatically renew the pilot. There was language in that allowed us to do that. The IDA typically, though, as a matter of practice, makes sure that it reaches out to the taxing jurisdictions so they have an opportunity to review these things, because lots change in 20 years. You know, things change, people change. So we wanted to and insisted that we go back into the community, talk to all the taxing jurisdictions, and resolve some of the issues which were discovered. And the taxing entities were terrific to work with. We got it done. We had several meetings. And we all came to an agreement, and that's the way development works, and I certainly appreciate the fact that they all stepped up to the plate and helped us.
Okay, anything else? Anyone?
Thanks.
Well, it really comes down to just a lot of misinformation. And, we're going through the same process coming up with another one, and I hope we get that misinformation issues cleared up and everybody can move forward.
On the resolution, roll call vote.
Rob,
Yes.
Dave,
Abstain.
Don,
Yes.
Jeremiah,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Resolution carries. Thank you, everyone. Dan, you wanna talk to us about the new group at the airport?
Yeah, we're pretty excited about this. One of the things that you quickly discover in this business is that if you're going to advance the community, it has to be done in concert with the other impacted entities around town, around the county. We can't do it by ourselves, and frankly, virtually nobody else can do the development by itself. It has to be a coordinated effort. So, with respect to our very important business air park at the airport and activities at the Watertown International Airport, we have formed an organization. Informally, it's called the Black River West Development Corridor. And this is composed of the village of Dexter, the village of Brownville, the town of Watertown, the town of Hounsfield, the county of Jefferson, the IDA, and the airport. All of those entities have been sitting round tables, plotting and planning to further develop that area. And the IDA has, for some years now, taken steps, and as you have seen the report, spent a lot of money, almost $600,000 in beginning to develop the new air park. And so these organizations are coming together because we need a lot of things. We need, when I say we, this development corridor needs infrastructure primarily, water, sewer, three-phase power, whatever. All the infrastructure is needed out there. These are very expensive processes. Water has been delivered now throughout that corridor thanks to the town of Hounsfield. But now we need to tackle the sewer issue, and we're taking this steps at a time. We got permission from DOT to hang a new sewer line underneath the new bridge, which is being constructed in Dexter, because we believe, this group believes probably the most immediate solution is to upgrade the sewer plant at Dexter, which is desperately needed, and run the sewage from the air park, the airport, from the development quarters, which will be created both east and west of the airport, to Dexter, and have that sewage be treated there. We have talked to National Grid about delivering natural gas lines there. We need that. All of this is being discussed. Dave Zembak has been working very hard with both National Grid, the CFA process, and so on, to get planning dollars to help us do this. As I say, we've already spent a veritable fortune out there trying to get environmental matters, acquiring land and all that. All of this is coming together. We had a meeting last week with more of the principals, trying to define how we're gonna do this, because we have two companies that have indicated interest in developing out there. Now, both of these companies, I can share with you, are local, but they are talking about expanding, and what we're trying to do is make sure that they expand in Jefferson County rather than someplace else, because indeed they could and have discussed the possibility of expanding elsewhere. So we're creating an environment as quickly as we can. Both of these companies are expressing interest right now in the Evans property, so our focus is to try to get there. We've talked to the engineers and design people about doing some temporary work. We've got a water line, but we don't have any sewer, we don't have any natural gas. How do we overcome that? We're working on those prospects as a temporary solution so that we can get them located there while we work on the permanent solutions. We intend to deploy the thing that we've talked about here on this board a lot, which is the microgrid concept, which means we generate and distribute energy on site, because if we don't have natural gas out there, we've got to figure out a temporary solution until we get natural gas, so that these people feel as though there's a future. Because even if they say to us tomorrow, we're ready to go, it's gonna be 3 years before they can move in. There's just no other, it takes that long to work through the process. So we've gotta give them a future, we gotta get them committed to this. I'm pretty confident, based on a meeting I had last week, that we will be getting a letter of commitment from one of these companies. Once that happens, probably a letter of intent would be more the actual document. But once that happens, then we've got something we can go to the funding sources to help us get this thing done. So it's gratifying to be able to work collectively on these projects, because you can't do it independently. If you go to a funding source and you say you have all of those public entities working together, plus a private sector job creator working with you, now you've got something that I believe is tremendously compelling. So that's what we're working on. That's why all the resources are being devoted as quickly as we can to the airport site. Bearing in mind now, we don't have a lot of choices. You know, the choices that we had for putting people on a site that is developable is not that great anymore. The good news is we've been fairly successful in siting companies on our existing parks, so we got to get another choice in. I should add parenthetically, we're still working very closely with Mark Purcell and his activities on next to Route 81 on Bradley Street, trying to find a business that is suitable for that location. And the notion of having the red one or the green one when you go to a developer is important, as opposed to having just the red one. You want the red one? No, you don't want the red one. All options are off the table. In this case, we can talk to people who have an interest in locating near an airport or that type of transportation, or we can talk to them about the Purcell site, which is right on 81. It's a perfect, north-south corridor, the development corridor. So it's part of a very comprehensive development that we have underway, but the good news here is we're all working collectively to try to make it happen. And by the way, money that we receive from the RCI, which is the Residential Community Initiative, that when we worked with Fort Drum some years ago, all that money is, and then some, has been poured into development at the airport. That's what happens, that if we do a development project over here, the money that comes to the IDA, or in this case, if the county is willing to help us, goes to a specific development project. In this case, money's out at the airport. So, we're not filling the coffers here with this money. It goes in one door and out the other to try to make sure that this development occurs. So I'm very happy about the progress being made. We're not there yet, but we are making progress. So.
Are the two companies that are interested, would they be classified as through the gate operations?
Both of them have expressed very determined interest in that, and we're addressing that question right now with the airport, with the FAA. It's not an easy issue. While the FAA understands it adds value to have through the fence operations, they're also concerned about security. So we may end up, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out, so please don't hold me to anything yet, but we may end up deeding a portion of the property that we purchased. Let's take the Evans property. A small portion of that we may end up deeding to the airport, so that the airport can fence it, so that it is secure, and yet our businesses can back up to the airport property with hangars and so on right next to their property, and some type through the gate connection, so they can walk right into their hangar. And that's a real value to these companies. The two companies we're talking about are aviation oriented, and so it's very important for them to be able to do this. And if we can't do it, then they consider going somewhere else where it can be done. But right now, at the moment, there is a notion that this is the kind of development that will occur. That's on the western side. The eastern side of the airport, it is likely we're not going to have through the fence operations. We'll have people interested in aviation, but they'll have to make the circuit around to the regular gates and that kind of stuff. So, if that helps.
Will all or part of it be foreign trade zones, those types of?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So they'll get all the acronyms associated with all the
Actually,
policies.
it's currently designated as a foreign trade zone, so we've got 3 magnet sites. We've got our corporate park, the airport, corporate park, and the city center park, so.
Since we're talking about the airport, I'm wondering if our 2 newest members have seen that audio-visual presentation of the futuristic look of the airport park.
I have not.
That we saw.
I have.
Okay,
I have not.
that might be something.
Yeah,
maybe
it would be
Marshall could
interesting
help
to-
you with that.
I will make sure you see it.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive. Anyway, so far the word is very positive. We continue to move forward to the best of our ability and trying to get it accomplished. A couple of more things, in passing, Dave, if you don't mind. I don't know if you guys remember during orientation, but you hear convergence a lot. You'll hear this come up in board meetings from time to time. The IDA owns the upper floors of that facility on Arsenal Street. That belongs to us, part of our assets. However, Convergence provides resources to maintain that building and to do some capital investment when necessary to make sure that it's up to snuff. And this board, for the last couple of years, has embarked on a fairly comprehensive approach to improving the structure itself. And we've done a number of things, which I won't go into great detail, but we've rebuilt the heat vac system. We've done a great deal for safety issues. We've resurfaced the exterior of the building. We've done a lot of work, and we are working in concert with our local developer in town because he owns the lower half of the building. So we're constantly trying to improve that facility. But it is a terrific asset in terms of, at least from my opinion, for this organization. And the last thing, you'll hear us talk about pilots and pilot payments, and you'll see these things flowing through our books. This IDA does something which not every IDA in the state does, many do, but not all, is that we not only develop pilot agreements, but we administer the monies from those agreements. They come to us from the companies, and then we allocate that by formula to the taxing jurisdiction. So that money flows through this agency, and Lyle and his crew keep track of all this money that's flowing, through, and make sure that the payments are distributed to the taxing entities at the appropriate time and in the appropriate amount. So you hear these flow through agreements and discussions from time to time. That's why that is occurring. So.
Anything else? Any one of the board members have anything?
We forgot to mention, by the way, that we, as you can see behind us, we record all of these meetings and we put these on the internet so that if at any time you want to reference back to it, or if somebody says, well, you said that, you can say, no, I didn't say that. What I said was, you can look back and see exactly what was said, by whom and at what given time. We think that agencies like ours are someday in the near future will be required to do this. We're just trying to be a little advanced on that. And also let you guys know as board members that if, as a board member, there's an organization that you either are working with or like to invite or whatever, these facilities are here for your use. We have 2 of the boardrooms. Please feel free. It has all of the connections to the internet and go to meetings and all that kind of stuff if you need or want to. So.
With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.